In this video we'll look at some tools that are useful for 3D modelling with Blender 5. The objective is a quick look at tools that are useful for beginners and intermediates. Hold the middle mouse button down and drag to rotate the viewport. Hold Shift, press the middle mouse button and drag to pan the viewport. Use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Press the period button on the numeric pad to zoom into a specific selected object. Press numpad 1 for front view and Ctrl plus numpad 1 for back view. Press numpad 3 for the right view and Ctrl numpad 3 for the left view. Press numpad 7 for the top view, Ctrl plus numpad 7 for the bottom view. Press numpad 0 to toggle between the active camera view and the previous view. Press Shift and A to add an object to a scene, such as a mesh. For some operations, there's a small pop-up in the bottom left of the viewport which you can expand to manually change some of the settings to the values that you want. With an object selected, you can press G to move the object around the viewport in 3D space. Press R to rotate the object. Press S to scale the object. If we press G and X, we fix the movement to be on the X-axis only. Alternatively, Y or Z for the other two axes. When rotating or scaling objects, we probably want to apply the transform with Ctrl plus A. We switch between the object and edit mode using the tab button. We switch between the selection modes by pressing 1 for vertex selection, 2 for edge selection and 3 for face selection. Click on a vertex, select it, then shift click to select another vertex. We can then shift control click further around to select that vertex and all the ones in between. Alt click on the edge between two vertices and it will select the whole loop. We can use Ctrl plus or Ctrl minus to increase or decrease the number of vertices selected. We start with a cylinder. Press numpad 1 to go to front view and then tab to enter edit mode. We press E and Z to extrude on the Z axis. We can hold down the control button to snap to grid, or we could type in the units of the distance we want to extrude. If we want to extrude outwards at this point, we press E, right click and then S to scale. If we want to do an inset on the top, we press numpad 7 to go top view and then I and drag the mouse button to do our inset. Let's say we want to remove this top inset bit but keep it for some other purpose. We can press P and then by selection to create a new object. Loop cuts are a great tool for adding geometry at specific locations. The keyboard shortcut is Ctrl plus R. For this geometry we can either add them horizontally or vertically. The mouse wheel is used to either increase or decrease the number of cuts. Left click once you have the desired number of loop cuts and then move them into position. If you right click, they get evenly distributed. If you want to repeat an operation, use Shift plus R. Here we do an extrusion in the Z axis and then repeat the operation. Bevels can make sharp edges look more appealing. We use Ctrl plus B to start creating a bevel. The mouse wheel increases or decreases the number of divisions, and we can drag the mouse to increase or decrease the size of the bevel. We can reverse the direction of the bevel by pressing P after we press Ctrl+B. Modifiers are a powerful tool in Blender for applying a series of effects non-destructively until they are applied to your mesh. The mirror modifier is very powerful. It can be applied either in the X, Y or Z, or a combination of these axes. For example, we might have a profile that we want to mirror in the X-axis. For this example, we have only 1/4 of the structure that we have modelled. We can then just apply the Y as well as the X axis for the mirror modifier. Consider the situation where we want to put a cylindrical hole through a mesh. So we will create the mesh and then also a cylinder mesh of the size of the hole we want to create. We next need to add a Boolean modifier to our mesh. We then select the cylinder as the object that we want to cut out from our mesh. We move the cylinder into place. We can then hide it by pressing H to get a view of how the Boolean operation will look when it's applied. If we're happy with the outcome, we can apply the modifier and delete the cylinder. We can easily make copies of a mesh using the array modifier. Count is the total number of objects created. Offset allows us to set the relative offset in the X, Y and/or Z axis. We can also set the rotation and scale in the X, Y and Z axis. If we want a two-dimensional array, all we need to do is add a second array modifier. We then adjust the settings so we get our desired layout. In Blender, the subdivision surface modifier provides a great workflow for creating detailed 3D models. We start with a small amount of geometry and the modifier increases this. We can illustrate the approach by modelling an ornament. We start with a quad plane and extrude out to create the general shape of the ornament. We add a subdivision surface modifier and increase the levels. The next step is to use the knife tool to create some geometry which we could then use to move in or out of the object. We move the vertices around to refine the shape. We switch between wireframe and solid mode to help with the modelling, and we can also turn the subdivision surface modifier on and off in the edit mode. We move some of the points around to put them in more useful positions. A bevel has been applied to some of the inner lines so that we can localize our movements in and out to create slight depressions in the object. In edge mode, we select some of these inner lines of the bevels, but we do not select the final point where they join together, as we want to either pull out or push in to the ornament. We use G and Y to push the depression inwards or outwards. We can add a mirror modifier that should come before the subdivision surface modifier. We can then also select part of the center after the mirror modifier is applied and stretch that outwards as well to get a smooth shape. Switching the order of the modifiers changes some of the unsightly features at the top and bottom of this shape. Hard surface modelling is a popular workflow in Blender, where we're looking at present day or futuristic man-made objects which typically have hard edges, precise details and possibly symmetry or repeating patterns. Bool Tools is the main add-on for hard surface modelling, but after a time you might want to look for specialist tools such as Hard Ops, Box Cutter and so on. The first thing you need to do is to choose a different mat cap if you want to improve your efficiency. We start by creating the base of the object. Shift A to add a mesh, in this case a circle. I have selected fill type triangle fan to avoid creating an n-gon. Select and delete the vertices on the right hand side. Select all the points, then use G and X to move the semicircle to the left hand edge of our base object. Select the points on the right hand side and then extrude twice with E and X to cover the area where the Boolean operation will occur and the rest of the base. Next up, we create our cutter mesh that we will use when we apply the Boolean modifier. We create a smaller circle than our original base object. We move its center point to the middle of where it's going to be applied. In edit mode, we select the right hand side vertices and delete them. We then select our semicircle and using G and X we move it into position. Select the right hand points, extrude E plus X to move across to the center point and then apply a mirror modifier. Select clipping on the modifier, tab back out to object mode and apply the modifier. We then apply some thickness to our base object and the cutter. The cutter needs to be thicker. Press tab to go into edit mode, press A to select all vertices and then E and Z to extrude upwards. Finally, we're going to use our cutter object as a Boolean operation on our base to create the hole. First select the cutter object, then shift click on the other mesh that is going to have the Boolean applied to it. Control and slash on the numpad will apply a Boolean and then we hide the object so we can see the hole that has been created. The rest of the object is creating following a very similar workflow. If you intend to do a lot more hard surface modelling, it's very much worth investigating the various tools such as Hard Ops and Box Cutter that will make your progress and work a lot more efficient. So that covers a basic set of modelling tools for Blender. Hopefully this has whetted your appetite to look further into different techniques, to experiment and try them out yourself. While learning Blender, you need to find a happy medium between following tutorials and working on building things yourself using the knowledge that you've learned.